Today we have a session about the planning and heritage, New South Wales planning legislation, and a bit about the heritage and how is heritage treated in New South Wales, and with a special, of course, special view on North Arm Cove. Just to let you know, to everyone, that this session is recorded, and you will be able to review it later when it becomes available. We are working on uploading that on a system, or probably on YouTube. I would like to start with the acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today, and acknowledge Moremi people as well, who are traditional owners of the land of Port Stephens, where the North Arm Cove is situated. I would also like to pay my respect to their elders, past and present and emerging, and extend the respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people who might be listening to this session anytime. Few words about Tatjana DJURIČ-SIMOVIĆ, who is going to be doing the presentation today. She has more than 25 years of experience, with 16 of those years spent involved with all aspects of New South Wales planning, statutory or strategic, infrastructure planning, asset management in private sector as well as on a state level. She has exceptional understanding of New South Wales government planning framework, strategic policies and development standards, as well as state and Commonwealth legislative planning environment. She has a remarkable ability to translate planning policy into effective planning tools. Tatjana's work is present in significant number of current is found in a significant number of current New South Wales government planning policies and instruments. She has proven record of successful formulating feasible options and pragmatic recommendations, translating technical data into simple and effective policies, and drafting of planning legal instruments, SEPs and LEPs, or developing control plans for local and state authorities. She has interdisciplinary academic background encompassing architecture, asset management, planning, urban design, and public sector management. So anyway, now I hand it over to Tatjana, and we all are going to listen. She's going to share the screen. And
yes, very soon. Thank you, Dejan, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and watching maybe a recorded session. I'll just share the screen with you now. So this would be the title of my presentation. The purpose is to help you understand some basic concepts in the current New South Wales planning system and how it affects the places like North Arm Cove. This competition is about new ideas and innovations and future cities, but even an ideal city of the 21st century would still need approval from a local council. I hope this short presentation will also help your understanding of the unique planning heritage of North Arm Cove and potentials for future development built on 100-year-old plans. So to understand what planning rules and regulations apply to North Arm Cove, let's first begin with a very brief overview of the New South Wales planning system. I know this topic is a bit dry, but I will try to make it short and sweet, hopefully, for you. So land use planning in New South Wales is controlled under the provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. It is at the core of state planning. John Ment, that I quote here, one of the leading urban planners and planning lawyers in New South Wales, now retired, used to call this act Development Assessment Act, not Planning Act. And he called even the system tragic. It is sort of true that there is not so much planning in the act itself. It is mostly about planning administration and procedures set up in the process of development assessment and approval. So with a dash of sarcasm, John Ment described the purpose of planning to be separating land uses, getting rid of non-conforming uses, and increasing the need to travel. Now, let's have a brief look at the major components of our complicated legalistic planning system. I have identified 3 groups of instruments or tools in New South Wales planning system. The first group deals with strategic planning, and it's made of region plans and district plans prepared by the state government. In addition, local strategic planning statements are prepared by councils and need to be approved or assured by the state government. Councils are also free to prepare local strategies for various types of land uses and activities within their area, but these documents have no legal weight, so they are used only as a background information. The second big group represents so-called environmental planning instruments. These are tools that will help us achieve aims of the adopted strategic plans. And they are composed of state environmental planning policies, or popular acronym SEPs, then local environmental plans, or LEPs. These local environmental plans are prepared by councils but needs to be approved by the Minister of Planning. Councils also prepare their own development control plans with detailed standards for various types of development. And these documents, again, have no legal weight. So they're only guidance describing what council considered to be the most acceptable standards for their area. And finally, the third group is about development assessment and consent. The legislation framework set up different planning approval, so-called pathways. And the size and scale of development will determine which of these assessment pathways will be taken to assess the proposed development. So, for example, minor impact developments such as a new deck, a balcony, awning, or a barbecue backyard area will be classified as an exempt development. If the environmental impact is more than minor, it may be assessed as complying development. And then in order of increasing scale and environmental impact, there is local development, integrated, regional, state significant development, and state significant infrastructure. Now, I would like to give you some tips on how to navigate, maybe research the New South Wales planning system, especially for those students who are not from New South Wales, and how to find the information you may need in this research or maybe in your future professional work. So the best place to start, especially for those with little or no prior experience with the system, would be a visit to the New South Wales Planning Portal. You can find it on a website, which is here on the screen. It's planningportal.nsw.gov.au. The portal is described by the government as a digital place where community, industry, and government can work together to better understand and meet their obligations under the relevant Planning Act. The government claimed that the New South Wales Planning Portal makes planning system easier to use. And it's true, the government were trying hard since 2011-12 to simplify the law and the regulations in New South Wales. But I think there is still room for improvement. So once you're on this website, on the opening page, find the red tab that says find a property, and on this screen it is at the bottom right side, and just click on that. This will take you to the EPlanning Spatial viewer. You can see at the left side at the top, you can search for any piece of land in New South Wales by typing in the address or lot and DP number. The search result will show you then the cadastre map with the zoning underlay with your property marked by yellow dashed line. There are also some tools available on this system to identify which state and local environmental planning instruments apply to the subject land. On the left side, you can see you can also turn on different layers to see what standards, development standards, shown on various maps in legal instruments apply to the development, potential development at your site. There is also the same page. There are also some useful measurement tools so that you can measure distance or area on the map. Yesterday, somebody asked at the presentation on Walter Bailey Griffin, what is the average size, lot size at Castle Craig? So this is something that you can check using this tool. So you can measure area or distance. And the other function that's useful is you can generate a so-called planning report. It is a button on the right side of the right to the search box. Now, if we click on a planning report and the system would generate this for us, it looks like this, what you see on the screen. So the planning report, hypothetically, for one of the addresses in North Arm Cove would look like this. It will include some useful information, such as what local environmental plan applies, what are the primary development standards, such as a maximum height of building, floor space ratio, minimum lot size, acid sulfate soil class, etc. It will also give you, on the subtitle detailed planning information, it will give you the list of all SEPs or state environmental planning policy which apply to this parcel. However, this list is often incorrect due to the complexity of the system. It still hasn't been perfected by the government. So for that reason, there is a small print that I copy and paste for you on the right side of the screen, which says that the report provides general information only, and it does not replace a special certificate the councils would issue upon an owner request, and of course they will charge for it. So the planning report will also list which Aboriginal land council the land is in, and some other information such as if the site is prone to bushfire, or if the land is near a major electrical infrastructure. If you want to see the full legal instruments such as LEP or those state environmental planning policy, they are available on the New South Wales legislation website. Again, I put the address here for you. It's legislation.nsw.gov.au. So the when you get to the opening page, click on the tab on the far left side, which says Enforce, and it will open up this page that you see in front of you. It's showing 3 types of legislation in New South Wales, which are acts at the top, statutory instruments or regulation that accompany some acts. I don't think you will need them for this exercise. And then at the bottom, there are environmental planning instruments, which are those councils, LEP, and state environmental planning policies, or SEPs. They're all listed in alphabetical order. All these LEPs you can also find on Council's website, but all links from Council's website would actually bring you back to this page. Development control plans that I mentioned as guidance are published only on Council's website. They have no legal weight, but are useful as guidelines. And those plans, development control plans, Council's plans, are still important to speed up the process of assessment. So the more consistency with the DCP rules in your development application, the easier will be to get the project approved by Council. Now we will have a brief look at which of these state and local environmental planning instruments, so LEPs, apply to the area of North Arm Cove. Pictured here is Walter Burley Griffin, creator of Canberra, but also the architect and planner, who in 1918 created the first urban subdivision for Port Stephens City, or North Arm Cove as it is known today. A little bit of history and planning heritage. So Griffin's plans for North Arm Cove, pictured here on this slide, were approved by then Stroud Shire Council in 1918. More historical details on North Arm Cove development are included, I believe, in the briefing to this competition. And I also believe that an article that I published for Walter Burley Griffin Society in September last year will also be available in the resource section on the competition website. So Marion Mahoney Griffin, Walter's wife, credited her husband with identification of the locality as one of only 2 natural seaports in Australia. While Peter Harrison, Australian town planner, described the Griffin plan for North Arm Cove as one of his most elegant essays in site planning. So that is the reason why this place, almost frozen in time, has been selected to underpin your research for the ideal city of the 21st century. A little bit about today's North Arm Cove. It's a village of around 450 inhabitants, residents. It lies approximately 200 kilometers north of Sydney, on the northern shore of Port Stephens in the mid-north coast area of New South Wales. Now, let's have a look, where is the NAC in the state strategic planning? North Arm Cove is located within a so-called Hunter region in New South Wales. The government prepared the Hunter region plan in 2016 as a blueprint for the future development for the following 20 years, which will take it to 2036. The area of Hunter region covers central to the north coast of New South Wales, with western boundary approximately 200 kilometers away from the coast. The Hunter Regional Plan can be found on the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, and the address is at the bottom of this slide. So the government vision for Hunter is to create a leading regional economy in Australia with a vibrant metropolitan city, and that is Newcastle at the heart of it. Newcastle is the capital then of Hunter region. I suggested you may explore the impact of this regional centre on the future development of North Arm Cove. I love this picture of Newcastle. It's a very stylish place, and people from Newcastle, they call themselves Novocastrians. It sounds very posh and sophisticated, which seems to be the right description. The Hunter region is home to more than 860,000 people and is still growing due to its reputation as one of the great places to live and work. Now, in post-COVID world, it seems it will become even more popular due to the recent trend of slight depopulation of Sydney metropolitan area. The government promised to deliver its vision for Hunter region through 4 goals, and these are a leading regional economy in Australia, a biodiversity-rich natural environment, thriving communities, and greater housing choice and jobs. Unfortunately, the Hunter Regional Plan makes no mention of North Arm Cove or its heritage. At the local level, so local strategic planning, Mid-Coast Council prepared their local strategic planning statement that sets out a future vision for land use planning across their area. And still nothing on North Arm Cove, even in local strategic plans. The document is available from the council's website. Now we can briefly touch on the State Heritage Protection Framework. So there are 2 acts that protect heritage in New South Wales, and these are Heritage Act 1977 and National Parks and Wildlife Act 1974. The legislation recognizes different types of heritage, such as Aboriginal heritage, cultural heritage, environmental heritage, or intangible or living heritage. So relevant to North Arm Cove, this would be that the place would be described as environmental heritage, where places, buildings, works, relics are of heritage significance. Property in heritage legislation, a property is an environmental heritage item if it is listed in LEPs or local environmental plan, if it's listed in state heritage register or a national heritage register. So subdivision of North Arm Cove and the place itself has not been recognized or its planning heritage value at any of these levels. Now briefly to look at the local government planning controls for North Arm Cove. As said before, the North Arm Cove is located in the Mid-Coast Council, the local government area. The council was formed in 2016, so 4 years ago only, through a merger of former 3 councils, the Gloucestershire, Great Lakes and City of Greater Taree councils. North Arm Cove is located on the southern border of the Mid-Coast Council. It seems to be away and disconnected from administrative centres at Foster, which is about 100 kilometres north from the village. The urban context of North Arm Cove points out that it is more part, maybe, I will leave this to you to define, but maybe it is more part of the Newcastle greater area than a part of foster urban development. I would also suggest that in your research for this competition, you explore the location of North Arm Cove within the Port Stephens Bay. Current local planning regulations that are placed in the Great Lakes Local Environmental Plan 2014. So under this LEP, all land in North Arm Cove is included in two zones. The smaller part, approximately 400 lots along the waterfront of the peninsula, is zoned RU5 Village. On my slide, you can see the zoning map is the one on the far right side. RU5, the village zone, allows owner of the land to build a house on his or her land. However, the larger part of North Arm Cove, approximately 3,000 lots, reaching all the way north, close to the Pacific Highway, that part is zone RU2 Rural Landscape. By the force of another LEP clause, with 4.2a, I know maybe there are too many details, but just for the records, that by the force of this clause 4.2a, the land in RU2 Rural Landscape Zone has been almost frozen in time, as these lots have no dwelling entitlement. The mechanism for that is that clause 4.2a placed the condition that only lots size 40 hectares or larger can have a house built on them, which is unrealistic condition placed to prevent building houses at the moment in this area. Currently, the only item of heritage significance, and it's listed on the State Heritage website, is Guringai Aboriginal Place in North Arm Cove. It has been identified as a traditional men's ceremonial site used by Warimi Aboriginal people since pre-1788 times. The status of this site has been questioned by one of the councillors of North Arm Cove Ward at one of the recent council's meetings. So New South Wales Heritage Office would need to investigate further the heritage significance of this site. The subdivision pattern of Port Stephens City, or what is today North Arm Cove, reveals the unique urban morphology similar to Castle Craig. So those that watched yesterday presentations by Glenda and Michael would be familiar now with the significance of this Sydney suburb, Castle Craig. So Castle Craig is identified as the heritage conservation area in a Willoughby Council. And as a comparison to North Arm Cove, Castle Craig area enjoys a set of development controls that protect original Griffin's urban design principles, such as recommendation for no high fences or no fences at all, or protection of a network of public open spaces that runs along the back of properties as public walk-through. In your research for this competition, it would be important to investigate any other state and local planning and development legislations or guidance. For example, it is important to consider predicted coastal flooding resulting from climate change towards the end of the 21st century. Here is the example of the site maintained by CSIRO and Geoscience Australia, showing the result of the natural hazards awaiting coastal area of Australia. So if we look at this map, the good news is that it appears that the area of North Arm Cove, apart from the small area along the waterfront, that it looks pretty safe from potential coastal flooding, at least until the end of 21st century. And to finish this presentation on a lighter note, here is what Tilbert's boss thinks of urban planning. Good luck to all of you with your competition submissions. I'm sure it will be a success. And now I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, Sophia has a question. She's asking if in a competition we are allowed to make changes to the original planning of the site, with having arguments, of course, why, supporting that with the arguments, or are we limited to the original one?
Who would answer? Do you want Dan, or it's me? It's a question for me or for you?
I think that, yeah, it would have to be a reasonably good argument. Okay, there are constraints. I don't know if Tatjana or if anyone has mentioned so far, but this land has been, is privately owned. So the land in the residential, sorry, the land, individual lots are privately owned, and it would be really unrealistic to change that. That's why I had mentioned last time, I think on my presentation, that there are going to be areas where there is no residential. Those are the areas that were in original plan meant to be for different uses other than residential. So some public or some communal or different maybe retail or business. There was originally there was a railway station there, which is not there, so there is a space for that. So those areas are going to be, subject to of the planning. Also, one of the reasons why we're insisting on this heritage, if there was not a heritage and this pattern that is already established, then this suburb would be like any other piece of land anyway. And you might as well design it somewhere else. As I agree that can be still within a premise of the ideal city or ideal town for 21st century. But yeah, you can try if you have a good argumentation. I would be, if it's not realistic that it's going to happen, so that would be really up to you to find, if you find to do it.
I can only add that I'm such a big fan of Walter Burley Griffin and his work and Marion's work that I just believe that we can build on what their principles were for the nice cities, ideal cities. So that's why I'm thinking maybe that smaller alterations, yes, but the way that the subdivision was sort of currently set up following the topography is just seems like the most logical solution. But of course, I believe that maybe, of course, changes with maybe the waterfront or so many other ideas about open space and the waterfront.
Question from John is, are there any additional resources to the master plan framework other than Griffin master plan? Some like explanations of zoning and other.
Well, there are really no other master plan. This area has been completely neglected by any sort of strategic plan or master planning or precinct development. So that's why it's just frozen in time. So it's only Griffin's plan, Griffin subdivisions that's there. All lots has been sold. 100 years ago, it changed owners through time, but there is no other master plan except.
In principle, where can people find explanations or other zoning than what is available here? So LEP has a.
Yes, it's there are other. Now it's a bit complicated. It's legislation. It's in the, I don't know, Jan, if you want me there is so-called something standard principle, standard instrument. But if you look, maybe just open at the Great Lakes LEP 2014, the whole document, if you can find on the New South Wales legislation website, and they have other zones that apply elsewhere in their government area. So maybe it will sort of give you an idea. There are other zones. Rural zones are RU, then residential zones are just R. Business zones start with B, and industrial IN. So you will be able to sort of look at the objectives of the zone that are defining the purpose of the zone. I think it would be self-explanatory. So have a look at the Great Lakes LEP 2014.
I think definitely that everyone should be having a look at the LEP, local LEP, but also DCP. It's not legally binding, but it provides information of what is council aiming at in terms of different zoning. It does explain, I mean, both LEP and DCP explain how residential zoning should look like. So what are the setbacks, what are the heights, what are the expected, the sizes of the premises, how the buildings should sit on that. But it is just illustration, and it is for your information. It's a part of the research that you might want to use at some future, sometime in the future, not necessarily here. For in our case, it is more for you to concentrate on the uses that are needed for a place to live, survive. So what is needed in this area so that people can live normally, rather than going into the details of legislation to achieve it. So I think that would be too complex to go into.
Yeah, I agree. But at the moment, North Arm Cove has absolutely nothing except those houses. There are no shops. There is no kiosk. There is nothing.
Yeah.
So what would sort of be needed for the city of potentially 20,000, 15,000 people?
Part of the research is why we are, we would like you to, go on your own pathway, and you can always ask the questions. You can send us the email or ask the questions on the website or the other ways. If you have a, but we would like you, yes, we would like you definitely to go and look at LEP and definitely look at DCPs. And anything that is available either on a website, council's website, but also there are others. Tatjana has mentioned on Port Stephens. At some point, North Arm Cove was part of the different council on Stroud Council, which is actually the council that was taking the whole northern and southern side of the of Port Stephens. So you have to look. I just wouldn't want that to be to prevent you from finding the best solution. So that's the. Don't be limited just by legislation. It's a useful information. You will need to know those things once you get into the real life, and how to learn how to use these tools. These are the tools for planning and for designing. You will have to satisfy these conditions that are in these documents when you lodge your applications for your designs. But don't be limited by strictly. At the moment, these documents don't mention North Arm Cove. They don't recognize that there is a subdivision there, that there is a...
Can I just interrupt? It's more maybe more aligned to this task could be reading the strategic plans. If you have a quick look at the Hunter Regional Plan, it doesn't mention North Arm Cove. It's talking about the area from Newcastle up north. So maybe within that narrative, you can sort of see what would be the role of North Arm Cove, of the new settlement within that urban morphology in that way. So the Hunter Regional Plan and maybe the Council's local strategic planning statement, which is a strategic plan on a local level and supposed to be to give effect to the Hunter Region Plan. And none of these plans are mentioning North Arm Cove nor Waterbury, Griffin, nothing. It's completely unrecognized as sort of a valuable heritage.
It is definitely LSPS, local strategic planning statement, that has been adopted just 2.5 months ago for a council, for Mid-Coast Council. It's not a big document. It has a lot of pictures, not much of a substance, but it's useful to see what the aims and which direction the council is aiming to go. It is interesting to compare strategy for the region and strategy for a council. How much does it align? None of them mentions the North Arm Cove, but you should be aware of what the strategy is from the authorities that are managing this area.
We may put even in a resource list, we can put the link to local strategic planning, those documents, those key documents that I mentioned in my presentation. We'll put it on the resource website. So for you, but I think it's pretty easy to find.
Do you want to explain maybe how does this area, paper subdivision, relates to the state government and a state regulation?
Well, at the moment, because the area where you can't build a house, it's sort of denying the minimum of private property rights. And these are special areas that are historical so-called subdivisions. They are called paper subdivision. You may also wish to investigate that. If you just type in paper subdivision New South Wales, it will take you to some websites. So the paper subdivision with this prohibition of building houses, since 2014, the government decided to resolve this problem because there are about 18 to 20,000 individual owners in New South Wales. They cannot build a house on their land. And they developed a mechanism that if the owners get together and organize themselves somehow, and if they vote for a development plan, so what is needed is 60% of landowners to vote, 60% that are actually owning 60% of the land. If they decide on a development plan and adopt it, then they can approach the government, the minister, and say, this is our plan, we would like you to enable development. So there is, the government is needed to coordinate, of course, and state at council if there is any land release, with coordination of probably setting up a so-called development authority that would finalize the plans. So that's the story about paper subdivision and why
the state has a role in potentially making North Arm Cove happen as a heritage.
As a land release, yeah, as a land release. because we thought it's such a valuable planning heritage that can be preserved only if it's built if it's revived, if it's actually built out.
But there are other, you want to mention other similar subdivisions like Environa and some others?
Well, I think
I mean, North Ancon is not the only one in this situation.
No, I said there are more than 20,000 landowners, 20,000 lots throughout the New South Wales, which are historical so-called subdivision that the land was subdivided, the lots been sold, and just never been realized. For some reason, then the government would stop because of the lack of infrastructure. But in this age of time, as you will hear from other presentations that are coming up in the following days, it is possible to have a completely self-sustainable, carbon neutral development of grids. So the infrastructure is not impediment to any urban release. What we sort of now have to think about is how to organize our settlements in other way, other than sort of relying on the roads, sewage infrastructure, etc., water provision that is supplied by used to be supplied by the government. So.
I don't know, if there are no more questions, is there anything you would like to add or clarify?
Well, I think maybe this was a bit too much of legislation, but it's good to have this sort of knowledge maybe and background to think.
It is essential. It's essential for future work of anyone who is involved in either planning or designing or getting approval from the council. You are going to get whoever gets even privately, if you are building a home, you will have to go through the council and you will find out what LEP is and DCP and how does it look like and why the people have so much problems with the councils and councils with the people as well. Some people are unreasonable. Would like to get more from their land, and that is where the fight comes between the councils and the developers. However, anyone who builds on their land is developer, so that's the nature of a process we have to go through. Okay, if there is no more questions, I will then just close. Thank Tatjana for I think a very useful, very nice presentation, very informative, and we are going to meet again tomorrow. This presentation is going to be available on a video, so you can revisit this with some links. We are going to put some links on an additional information on a resource page. There are going to be more information. As I said, feel free to communicate with us. There is a lot of information. We really don't want to, we would like to direct you, but we would like you to discover. And I think that these presentations are just giving you direction where to go. You got some information from Tatjana, some links. It is useful to start looking. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow, hopefully.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.